So we really need to be thinking about what vantage point are we coming from? And are we adopting a past belief to operate from? Or are we updating our operating system? Are we operating out of someone else's perspective of us? Are we operating from a playbook, a game of life, or a code of life that's part of a subculture maybe, and it doesn't fully align with us? So here are 3 very practical, strategic, tactical ways that you can rewrite your stories. 1, catch yourself mid-story. And so I want to encourage you to actually put the ideas, put things on trial and see if they hold up. Most of the time, they crumble, kind of like monsters under the bed, right? They're not usually there, but we think they are. So, some of these things are natural, and then we have to just quickly call to action, is this true? It's a really important thing. Welcome to The Julie Holly Show, From Wish to Reality, the podcast where we explore how to turn your biggest dreams into real life wins. Whether you're chasing a bold new goal, redefining success, or rediscovering what truly lights you up, this show is here to help you take inspired action and live with purpose. Let's get started. I'm wondering if you have ever felt stuck, not because of your circumstances, but because of the stories you keep telling yourselves. It might be something along the lines of, I'm not ready to take that next step, or I'll get serious about my dreams when life slows down, when the kids get older, when we have this type of income. These stories shape everything. The truth is that your wish, that thing that is pushing inside of you, it doesn't have to wait. And really, it shouldn't wait. That's why I'm inviting you to join the next Wish Fulfillment cohort. Starting April 1st, it's right around the corner. This is a space that is designed to help you rewrite those limiting beliefs, to reconnect with what you really want, and take steps to make it happen. Don't put it off. You'll thank yourself for starting now. I can assure you of that. Spots are limited to 8 people, so grab yours today. The link is in the show notes. Now, if you were disappointed because Monday rolled around and the episode was not live, I owe you a massive apology. I actually recorded the podcast episode last week. I was so proud of myself. And then my amazing editor reached out over Slack and said, hey, just need to let you know that there's no audio. So this awesome new mic that I have, and the way I like to talk with my hands, apparently I touched the wrong part of the mic. It hit the mute button. So thank you for your patience. Mondays are usually our Mindset Monday days. I know that this episode is going to come out with delay because I'm having to re-record it, and I appreciate your graciousness. And I hope that you also see this as role modeling. Things happen, accidents happen. That's real life. And what we do when that happens, that's what shows the substance that we're made of. So let's go ahead. Let's dive on into the stories that we are telling ourselves and how we can rewrite those limiting beliefs. You've heard me talk in past episodes about the problems that we manufacture and the stories that we create. And the reality is that a lot of the things that come to mind are usually manufactured from within. I love to dip into crucial conversations. You've heard me reference this book a million times. I love this book so much. And I love the flow chart that they have that is called Path to Action. You can Google this, put Crucial Conversations Path to Action, and you can actually see what this looks like. I will try my best to describe it to you. Imagine a flowchart with 4 sections to it that are leading into each other. And the first thing that happens, and this is how we manufacture the things in our head, is that something happens. We see and hear something. And when that happens, in less than a millisecond, we tell ourselves a story about that. And then that story shapes, in the third box over, how we feel, and those feelings drive our actions. It is seriously like the cause and effect of so many things. Let's break this down in a real life example. So let's just say that Jason, we're going to just nickname this character Jason. Jason, his boss, like sends him a vague email and it says something like, "Hey, let's talk tomorrow." And Jason sees that email and without even realizing it, he starts creating a story. And maybe you can relate to this. "Oh man, I must have messed something up. Maybe I'm getting fired. Maybe I'm getting laid off, like, my colleague." And that story sparks feelings, those feelings of anxiety, uncertainty, doubt. And so now Jason goes home. He sits down for dinner with, his lovely wife, Jessica. They're sitting there and he's just absolutely distracted, all because of a story he manufactured in his mind. The stories that we tell ourselves determine how we feel, and that feeling drives our actions. I want to take this back and let's just imagine if Jason had told a different story to himself. Because a lot of times we can say, "Oh, and we'll assume negative stories. And we are created in a way to protect ourselves. And so I get that. That makes sense. Do we need to protect ourselves? Do we need to defend ourselves against something? And so we'll go to that primitive lower level brain. There is another option. Jason could have simply said, you can say lots of things, right? But he could have said, "That's interesting that my boss reached out to an email. I wonder if I'm getting that promotion. Oh my gosh, maybe I'm getting a raise. Maybe I'm going to be, the project manager on that new project I'm so excited about." If he told himself that story, could you imagine the feelings that would generate? Probably feelings of excitement, enthusiasm, like just maybe a zest for life. And then imagine how he would show up when he arrives home to hang out with his family. He's probably going to want to wrestle with the kids, like, embrace his wife. Like, there's going to be a lot of positive emotions. It's going to look a lot different. Now, I'm going to dip. I know not too many things, but I'm going to go there. What if we just said for agreement style and say, just how about we don't take it personally? How about we just receive it in a more neutral way and say, "Okay, got an email from my boss. He wants to talk tomorrow. No big deal." So we have voice and agency over the stories that we create in our heads. So we don't have to manufacture and fabricate these stories that create unnecessary anxiety and feelings that are going to lead us into showing up in a way that's lesser than we are created to be. So the first element when we are looking at limiting beliefs is we've got to look at the stories that we are manufacturing. It is so critical for how we are going to show up in the world. Here's the other thing. I'm going to do it. I'm going to challenge limiting beliefs like straight on, because this expression gets tossed around all the time. And here's the truth about limiting beliefs. Spoiler. Most of the time, they're not even yours or mine to begin with. Too often, these are things that they're old thoughts that we've picked up from past experiences, things people said to us, or maybe even what society or our little subculture says that we, air quotes, should believe. This happens a lot. We need to ask better questions. So instead of battling limiting beliefs, we could ask better questions like, what am I actually believing here? What would I do if I knew I couldn't fail at this? Sometimes I have to ask myself what version of Julie is showing up. So the reality is that oftentimes those of us who, enjoy stepping into who God created us to be and bravely just running on that racetrack, it's so much fun. But sometimes we don't allow ourselves space to actually update ourselves internally. Case in point, over the last 5 years, I've grown substantially, and I'm definitely not the same version of Julie as I was in 2019 or 2020. She's like just this whole different version. But sometimes I feel pulled back into that old version because I forget the capacity that I've grown into. So I remember what it was like to be in this past version of myself. And instead of operating from where I've grown into, I am operating out of where I was. And so that right there can also create limitations in our life that are absolutely unnecessary. It's so important for us to view ourselves from the outside. In fact, recently I took an entire day just to think, to process, to evaluate. I actually worked with AI to help me see myself in the things that I've accomplished and done from a new perspective. If you're following me on social media, you probably saw my post about this, and it was fun. It was just interesting to see that outside perspective that sometimes our friends and family aren't going to see quite so easily. So r- for example, I mean, even at at the Conscious Investor Growth Summit that recently took place, it's interesting because my family is so close to me. They're used to me. They've heard me snap at them. They've heard me be loving. They've heard me frustrated. They've seen me hangry and they've seen me excited. They see every single facet of me. And so they know the spectrum of how I can show up in the world. And they're just like, oh yeah, that's mom. Right. And then, coming across other people at the event, then it creates this, like on one hand, it's like, well, can you see me the way they see me? Right? You want them to. So we really need to like be thinking about what vantage point are we coming from? And are we adopting a past belief to operate from? Or are we updating our operating system? Are we operating out of someone else's perspective of us? Are we operating from a playbook, a game of life, or a code of life that's part of a subculture maybe, and it doesn't fully align with us? I mean, it's kind of interesting where I live. There are a lot of very interesting subcultures in very far north Idaho. And so the operating systems that people stem from are very very clear oftentimes, right? And so you can see people operating from defensiveness or from scarcity instead of from that abundance and the opportunities in life and such. And so we just want to be aware as to, is this just something, again, am I manufacturing this? Is this coming from the outside world pushing in on me? Or is this me not showing up in the fullness of who I have been created to be? And if we want to show up in the just vibrancy that God has created us to be, then we're going to have to just shed off some exoskeleton, some layers that are not serving us, that are holding us back. So here are three very practical, strategic, tactical ways that you can rewrite your stories. One, catch yourself mid story. Goodness, I do this quite often. So, what this looks like, let me share what it is, and then I'll give you a very personal example. Okay. So, we just pause. If we're feeling frustrated, anxious, uncertain, that right there is like, wee, wee, the sirens of like, just pause, just hit pause and just do an evaluation. And this takes practice. So, be kind to yourself, please. Recently, I've noticed that it's not recent that I've noticed this. It's recent that I've been able to pause in the middle before it turns into something more than it should. I have always been one to get very cranky and irritable when I am tired. It's not just hungry. If I am tired, I show up in the worst version of myself. So I've learned that I have to protect my sleep. It's not optional. But recently with the event and different things going on in life, I found myself, tired, and all of a sudden I was in the kitchen and we're, like cooking and there's music going and then someone's coming in asking questions and there are all these different stimuli taking place all at once. And I realized I was getting flooded. It was so much that, imagine if you had an empty glass and then all of a sudden someone comes and they pour an entire pitcher into your glass and it just is overflowing. It's flooding out. Okay. that's how all that stimuli made me feel because I was tired. It was the end of the day. I was starting to decompress. I was starting to get into some flow and just unwind. And then the stimuli just made me have to be back on again. And it was too much. In the past, I would have absolutely probably just like lost it. Like, oh my gosh, this is too much. Oh, and just snapped. But in this moment, and it's happening more often, which I'm sure everyone in the house is very happy about. But I was able to stop midpoint and just catch it. And I just called it like it is. I'm like, okay, I'm really tired and I'm noticing that there's music, there are sounds in the kitchen, there are sounds from people calling across the house. I can't stand that, by the way. And there's just too much going on. So, can we please turn the music off? Can we? And we actually worked together as a family. It worked out great. And we were able to just kind of de-escalate the situation, kind of bail some of that water out so that it wasn't flooded any longer. So I want to encourage you to catch yourself mid story and then let me know about it. Tag me over on social media so that I can celebrate with you. And when you share your stories like this, you are leading others into the opportunity of stepping further into who they're created to be. It's so awesome. Okay. You're going to love the next question, the next way we rewrite our stories. We've spoken about it before on the podcast, and that is we have to look for evidence. We ask ourselves that question, like, what evidence is there of this? We have to challenge the story. I guess I shouldn't say we have to. I would encourage you, we should challenge those stories and look for the actual proof that that substantiates it. A lot of times when we start looking closer, it's not reasonable. It's not realistic. I had some friends recently that reached out to me. They needed a little bit of guidance, and it was cool, being able to see what was taking place and the stories that were being manufactured. And it's like, okay, well, let me ask you some further questions. Did you ask the friend and I asked a few questions that were very specific to the circumstances. Well, no. Okay, so we were able to unpack where the stories were actually being manufactured in real time. And the single friend that I was talking to at that moment, it was like, "Oh my gosh. Yeah, this is all just a lot of me showing up, presenting little wounds to the situation, past wounds of mine that have nothing to do with the situation. There's no evidence that this other friend involved had anything to do with this, or that these were the motives, or it just debunked the entire thing. And so I want to encourage you to actually put the ideas, put things on trial and see if they hold up. Most of the time, they crumble, kind of like monsters under the bed, right? They're not usually there, but we think they are. And in all reality, I will say, like, I really don't like walking out to my car in the dark. Like, who does? You just can't always see, and you can hear all sorts of things in the middle of nowhere, right? So, I mean, like, some of these things are natural, and then we have to just quickly, like, call to action. Like, is this true? It's a really important thing. Okay, the last one I would like you to consider in rewriting your stories is to rewrite the ending. Okay, if you spotted an unhelpful story, replace it with a more empowering story that sparks action. So let's go back to that email situation, this fictitious little moment where Jason gets this email from his boss, I want to talk to you in the morning. Well, we could see very clearly what happens. If he takes that from that defensive posture, that insecure posture, he shows up with fear, doubt, insecurity, anxiety, and that plays out in the home life and every other part of life. Okay. But if he internalizes and says this ending could be very good, even if he got laid off, he could be like, well, if I get laid off, maybe that's going to open up the opportunity for me to start that business that I've been looking forward to starting at some point in life. Like we get to decide what the ending of the story looks like. So rewrite that ending. Here's the reality. We have optionality and we have agency. So you are the number one ruler of your mind, and it's your responsibility, right? The conscious investor philosophy states that we are the guardians and we are the gatekeepers of our minds. By a guardian, we mean that we are the caretakers of that mind. And by gatekeeper, it means that we are standing at the gate of our mind saying, this serves me, this doesn't serve me. You're not coming into this beautiful mind of mine. I'm not allowing it. And sometimes those stories, sometimes things get into our mind or we grow and we shift and we discover as guardians of our mind that that story no longer serves me any longer. And it needs to be released from the kingdom. Okay. So don't be afraid to update things as needed. It is definitely a requirement. If you've been waiting for the quote, perfect time to go about your goals, this is your sign. The next wish fulfillment cohort is starting on April 1st. There are 8 seats available. So missing out, that could be waiting a really long time and you don't want to let another next time pass you by. Like, don't do that. Don't play that game with yourselves. You're too important. You have too much to offer the world. So, you want to click the link in the show notes so that you can join us for the next wish fulfillment cohort. And I also just want to let you know if you're ready for something bigger, something deeply transformative, I want to encourage you to apply to the Wishmaker Circle. It is a mastermind for unstoppable people. It is designed for those who are serious about turning their wishes into reality, who have had some evidence of doing that and want to play at a bigger level. Not someday, starting now. Okay. So that there is an application link in the show notes below. The stories you tell yourself, they shape your reality. But here's the great news. You're the author. So what story are you going to write next? See you next time.